repair this without repairing the gut. In other words, what this is leading to, if you have mental problems, or you have emotional problems, or you have neurological problems, and a lot of the typical neurological problems, including Alzheimer's, they feel which is an inflammatory response, are related to these sensitivities. So it's a broad spectrum of problems. And it's not just gluten. So if you're eating, food that's been altered, you're doing the same thing as gluten. You're giving yourself, in your key areas of your body, substances that the body doesn't know the hell what it is. Has no idea what it is. You're going to get the same response. You don't have villi to take that nutrient in, so the body's going to try to keep it out, and the keeping it out is what makes you sick. It's going to inflame.
What do you mean by altered, by the way?
Because what happens to villi will only take in nutrients, unless they're already damaged, that it knows what they are.
No, my question is, what do you mean by food being altered? What kind of alteration?
Processed.
That's why I mentioned Monsanto. That's their business, is all.
Preservatives. Genetically modified.
Frankenfood.
Yeah.
What?
I mean,
Frankenfood.
yeah, anything.
We're all eating it.
Drugs. Drugs. We don't have villi to take in our drugs. Why do drugs have to be so powerful? Does anybody ever ask you that question? Why do drugs are like bombs going off?
I got an easy answer for that.
Why?
They sell better.
No.
Magic pill.
No.
Yeah, nobody wants to wait 3 months for a result.
No, but
You
that's
get
not
3
it.
days for a result, you pay money for that.
That's not it.
Really?
Yeah, why a lot of symptoms go away with drugs?
Oh,
Because
because that's the only ones they do sell.
No. Why do you think that happens? I mean, physiologically, it's a simple answer.
Haven't studied it.
95% is excreted into the environment. They have to be so powerful to get past the liver that 5% residual actually gets it into the blood. The liver will break it down, and so you won't have any effect.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, I don't understand that.
The drugs have to be super powerful to have any physical effect, because you don't have a mechanism to metabolize them.
Any kind of drug.
Any kind of drug. So most of it is excreted. It has to be super powerful to go past the body's resistance. And many mainstream scientists feel that the symptom alleviation from the drugs is the body altering its response to go after the effect from the drug and ignoring the disease, because it finds it more of a threat. Not always, and that's a theory. Because 95% is excreted. That's why when you take the drugs, we're finding them in the waterways, we're finding them in the wild animals, we're finding them everywhere, because we excrete them, because it's poison to us. It's all over the environment. They found dangerous levels of birth control pills in the Thames River in the UK. Dangerous levels.
Do you have any good news for us tonight?
Yeah, this is all good news, because the good news, and I'll tell you the good news. To me, this is good news, because in my mind, and I don't know how many people here, because everybody here is particularly bright, that if we don't know what's going on, we don't know how to figure out what to do about it. That's my mind. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's the way I go by. And the fact that now we're now understanding what's happening to us means that those of us that will understand it, and those of us who will do the right thing, will adapt to this chronic disease epidemic. Like Doug is adapted. Doug is of superior intelligence and motivation. He found out he had a serious condition, and he adapted to it. And you're doing important scientific work and able to function at a high level. The idea of having the disease didn't incapacitate him. That's what we have to do. We have to recognize what this is doing to us, have the belief in who we are, that this is not an accident that we're finding this out, and then use this information so we can continue and help others. But we first have to understand this. Okay, so the gluten sensitivity, the way it's taught now is that it's not enough to be abstinent. You actually have to do the repair. And the repair takes, especially when it's a pathology, between 1 and 2 years. They found people with advanced dementia at Mayo Clinic, when they treated the gluten, they had MRIs of calcified brains, where people were in their 80s sitting and, dribbling and stuff like that. 9 months later, they start to drive a car again. And you see the MRIs that there's no calcification in the brain. So it is reversible, the damage. You have to have patience and you have diligence and you have to be religious. They found people that broke, one story that was given was a Catholic nun that had severe problems, and she swore on Jesus that she was totally gluten-free religiously, even in her lotions and those things, which it appears in. And then she relapsed. And what happened was one of the researchers was a Catholic, and he said, "Sister, what about communion?" And she said, "Well, I take a little bite of the communion thing." And that was enough to set her off completely. Now, there's some dioceses that are gluten-free as a response to that. It is expanding. Not all. Some of them say that they won't do it. But it is becoming better understood how serious this is. So this brings me to the next part of the presentation. And we're picking on Lyme because Lyme is an epidemic. So whatever you know about Lyme is how many people think like I thought. I mean, I'm the same as everybody else, that Lyme comes from a tick bite. Yeah. Well, you're right, but you're also incomplete. They've now found that Lyme can come from a mosquito, and it can come from sex, eukaryote, any exchange of bodily fluids, and other ways. So it's prevalent. So the way it was diagnosed historically for the last 15, 20 years was the Western blot test. Everybody thinks the Western blot is one test. It's not.
It's bacteria.
Yeah, it's a spirochete. It's similar to syphilis. And it's very much common with deer and other animals. Some people would get bitten and then have no symptoms, and some people wouldn't. You'll follow my thinking in a minute. And some people get deathly sick. Some people, the treatment of choice, mainstream was heavy-duty, really heavy-duty antibiotics. And some people, for as long as 2 years, some people would become symptom-free with the antibiotics, and some people would hardly help.
Are we talking about a course of antibiotics for 2 years?
2 years, so as much as that, some of the Lyme doctors are using.
It's insane.
If you're that sick, some people get so sick they're incapacitated, and they get these degenerative neurological diseases.
It doesn't get absorbed, so you got to do it for 2 years.
It's not that it doesn't get absorbed, that's the only thing they knew. And some of the alternatives with Lyme help, but there is no, in gluten there's a million scientific papers. In Lyme, there's no papers on non-antibiotic therapy that meets the criteria of the best science. And it's mostly anecdotal. And some of the Lyme clinics use herbs, and some of them are effective with some people, and some of them not. Basically, since it's a spirochete, the assumption was herbally that since syphilis responded to certain herbs, that maybe Lyme will respond to the same herbs.
What are the symptoms? Are there any generic symptoms?
Generic symptoms are unexplained flu-like symptoms, arthritis, gut problems, rashes, neurodegenerative diseases.
Inflammatory responses?
It's always a inflammatory response. Now, what's the inflammatory response? If your tight junction, that's the key thing to understand, that's your takeaway today. If your tight junctions cease to be tight, what's your body going to do to defend itself?
Can I go sideways on you for a second here?
Yeah.
If you're exposed to a pathogen, either aerosol or in other ways that get directly into your bloodstream, how does your gut come into play in terms of an immunological defense?
It doesn't have one in the blood, and Michael probably knows more about it than I do about. Once the pathogen gets in the blood, what is your body's response?
White blood cells. right?
Only antibody and antigen reactions. The main,
Well, there's also the innate immune system that can mop it
Yeah.
up if it's just a few. But if it's massive, then you get, so the first line filter from the gut is the liver. And that has sort of a system of cells that take up anything that's foreign.
And the liver is an inherent blood processor and filter, so
Yes.
it's in your
Yes.
blood, it's going through your liver
So the
repeatedly.
blood from the gut gets transported through the portal vein into the liver. And then it gets filtered there, and then from there it goes into the heart and into the rest of the body.
Mhm.
So if you overload your blood from the gut to the liver with bacterial products because you have permeable gut, the liver at some point is not going to be able to filter everything out, and then a lot of these bacterial products, even if the bacteria are not alive, just the leftover products themselves are immunostimulatory and can give you all kinds of symptoms. So-
you know, symptoms,
Yeah,
disease.
what I was getting at though is something you said earlier, which was the gut was something like 90% of your immune system.
70 to 90.
70 to 90% of your immune
Yeah,
system. And your exposure through skin absorption and aerosol absorption is non-gut oriented exposure.
Right,
Gets directly into your bloodstream through those pathways.
right.
And I'm curious as to about what the first line of defense is
Spleen,
there.
Spleen and liver.
Spleen and liver.
But if your liver is dysfunctioning, like we find out.
If your liver is already compromised by your gut, then
Yeah,
you're at a
you
disadvantage.
have a phase
Yeah.
1, phase 2.
Okay,
That's why we put people on liver detox,
got it. Okay.
because they can't handle the toxic or the pathological overload. That's why we do the cleanse for the liver. It removes a lot of the circulating pathogens. So what happens with the tight junctions is you get inflammation. What is inflammation going to do? It's going to fill up the tight junction that's spread because of the damage to the villi. And the cause of a lot of the chronic disease is the inflammation. So if you inflame, your body's trying to wall off the pathogen. And so in Lyme disease, why doesn't everybody become symptomatic? Why?
That would have been my next question.
Why, because that was, let me, before Michael explains, because Michael knows a lot more about it than I do. The Europe and the University of Stockholm, they asked that question. And because there's a different strain of Lyme in Europe than it is in the United States. And they came up with a challenge test called a Marisa test that could see if your own body is responding to the Lyme. So if you're responding to the Lyme, you're going to get a cytokine, what Michael called the innate immune response. You're going to get a cytokine chemokine response that can be measured to this challenge of your own of Lyme to your own pathogens in your body. And so if you have that cytokine reaction, then you have full-blown Lyme. But if you go back to what I was saying, is that if you have your villi and your tight junctions open, Lyme is just one of many things that can be trickling in here. And we said, why does not everybody get better from doing the antibiotics? You're killing the Lyme. You can't kill all the Lyme. But you can bring the load down so it becomes asymptomatic. But unless you repair the tight junctions and the villi, you're still going to have invasions and you're going to have reoccurrences. So what we're seeing is the damage to the gut, the damage to the immune system, is making people much more vulnerable to things like Lyme. People that don't have the damage to the gut, that don't have gluten, don't have these things, are probably, and don't have long-term stress, can carry Lyme and it won't be symptomatic expressive, it won't be disabling. But those that have all these other things, long-term stress, damaged immune system, damaged digestive system, a liver that's not able to move from phase 1 to phase 2 because the diet is so bad, we're required to have certain indoles, which comes from certain